When I moved to Franklin County from Amherst 15 years ago, there was not a lot of restaurants at that time where you could go to find fresh, locally sourced, delicious food. But there was one place, and it's still one of the only places where I will still go and choose a beer over a wine as an aspiring wine snob. Our next storyteller will have the tallest tales, quite literally, from the People's Pint, Alden Booth.
For decades, I've been composting pretty much everything I get my hands on, including sometimes my own poop. Now, for some of you, that may be a little bit of a TMI, but you know, human manure, I mean, come on. Books have been written about it. And in fact, for some people, it's become practically a movement. Back in the 80s, my wife, Lissa, and I moved to Northfield. We bought our first house in Northfield. And one of the first things we did was put in compost piles, or compost bins made out of wooden pallets. And we also put in a big garden. Soon after that, I started my first real full-time job. It was at a fish farm, an indoor recirculating fish farm, high-tech, in Turner's Falls. We grew thousands of pounds of striped bass for the commercial market weekly. But being experimental in nature, there were times when we had some water quality problems. And water quality problems meant that in industry terms, we would sometimes have morts. Morts is short for mortalities, dead fish. And for someone who loves to compost, I saw that as a fringe benefit. But most of my other fellow employees didn't see it quite that way. So it became my job to deal with these morts frequently. And when my own compost piles couldn't take anymore, it was great stuff for compost, I had to find other ways of dealing with it. Once I remember we had a real issue with water quality one week, and we practically filled a dump truck with morts and took them east to a commercial composting facility. And I remember putting on fishing waders and standing in the back of the truck and shoveling these morts off onto a beautiful pile of ocean spray cranberry pulp. So they knew what they were doing at this facility. It was a beautiful mixture of the two, but I was on the bad end of it. And I tell you, those fish hadn't just died that morning either. Another time, I tried making fish emulsion. And so the company bought a big grinder, and we ground the fish up into liquid and added some acid to it and stabilized it. And I thought, wow, this is great, great for the garden. And so we sold it in 1-gallon jugs to local stores, garden stores. And I thought it was all going really great until I got a phone call from one of the garden store managers saying that his jugs of fish emulsion were exploding on his shelves. Thanks, Alden. Great for customer service, So needless to say, we shelved that project. And then there was the time when I decided to try digging long trenches in my garden, deep trenches, and I just filled them with fish. And I was feeling really good about that. I covered it over the soil, and we all heard in school about the Native American Squanto, who supposedly taught the Pilgrims about planting corn and putting a fish under each seed. This was a little bit more than a fish under each seed. The weather was warm, and after a few days, I went out to do some gardening and looked down, and you can probably guess what came boiling out of that soil. It wasn't corn. Another M word. Maggots. Morts and maggots. And I tell you, there were a lot of them. I really wish I had had a flock of chickens at the time. I was worried, actually, about the Board of Health showing up. And in fact, my next-door neighbor, who lived quite close, I thought would be a problem. But it turns out she was a pretty heavy smoker. and was mostly lived inside, was in our house most of the time. So I think our olfactory senses were compromised, and that mess of maggots and morts went unnoticed. So after I left that job, I started a business in Greenfield, a brewery and a restaurant, and all the grain from the brewery pretty much went out to farmers and was used to feed cows and pigs and goats. But everything from the restaurant, we composted from day one, 21 years of composting. And I mean, how could you? How could you waste that? So some of it we fed to our chickens, and the eggs from the chickens oftentimes showed up in the restaurant. But most of it was composted and was taken to my little farm in Gill, and we put it in 5-gallon buckets and hauled it up every week to the farm, and made some beautiful compost. It didn't have dead fish in it, but it was great stuff. And at the time, for a while there, we were homeschooling our 3 daughters, and I think they got a little bit more education than they wanted about organic waste management, i.e. Helping me pull lids off buckets, tossing them onto the compost piles, maybe with a maggot on the leg, and cleaning them out. And I tell you, there's nothing like that to inspire your kids to go off to high school. And about the last 3 or 4 years, though, we decided that let's start taking the compost, or let's start taking the organic waste over to Martin's farm in Greenfield. They have a great composting operation there. And yeah, they're doing a great thing. And I tell you, my back thanked me big time. But I have to say, I kind of missed those big piles. I did have an ulterior motive in building those compost piles. I had always thought that in the case of my sudden demise, my friends and family might just tuck me into one of those big steaming piles and give me a true green burial. Because, you know, after all, composting is one of those very few things that we all can continue to do after we die. Thank you.